The year is 1902, and the wooden planks of the Ellis Island Pier creak beneath the weight of thousands. Steam rises from the hulls of ships just arrived from Palermo, Naples, Messina. The air is sharp with salt, coal dust, and the unmistakable smell of human desperation. Men in threadbare suits clutch rope-tied suitcases. Women in black shawls carry children who haven't stopped crying since Genoa. They're speaking dialects older than nations, syllables that predate Italy itself, voices that belong to villages where bread was a luxury and vengeance was currency. They came to America because they were told the streets were paved with gold. What they find instead is mud, brick, and a different kind of war. By 1905, over 2 million Italians have poured into New York City. Most settle in a 10-block radius south of Houston Street, a cramped labyrinth known as Little Italy. Tenement buildings rise 6 stories high, blocking out the sun. Families of 8 share rooms designed for 2. The stench of raw sewage mixes with the aroma of roasting espresso and frying garlic. Children sleep in shifts. Privacy is a myth. Every window is a theater. Every alley is a confession booth. In the mornings, men stand on corners waiting for work. Construction, tunnels, docks, anything. They're paid half what the Irish get. They're called wops, guineas, doggos. Newspapers print cartoons depicting them as knife-wielding anarchists. Police regard them with suspicion, treating Little Italy like a foreign occupation. English is a riddle most cannot solve. The law is something enforced against them, never for them. And in that vacuum, something ancient begins to take root. The letters start appearing in the winter of 1903.
Simple notes, handwritten in broken English or crude Sicilian dialect, slipped under bakery doors, tucked into the mail slots of grocers and cobblers. Each one carries the same symbol, a black hand stamped or drawn in ink, sometimes dripping as if still wet with blood. The message is always identical: pay or everything you've built will burn. At first, the shopkeepers ignore them, thinking they're pranks. Then the bombings begin. A produce stand on Mulberry Street explodes in the middle of the night, scattering crates of tomatoes across the cobblestones like shrapnel. A tailor shop on Elizabeth Street is gutted by fire. The owner's wife barely escapes, clutching her infant through flames. A butcher in East Harlem who refuses to pay protection money is found in an alley, throat slit, ear to ear, his tongue severed and stuffed into his pocket. The police do nothing. Most don't speak Italian. Others are paid to look the other way. When victims do report the threats, detectives shrug and suggest they settle it themselves. The courts are no better. Witnesses vanish before trials. Jury members receive visits in the night. Judges find dead animals on their doorsteps. Justice in Little Italy is not blind. It is bought, intimidated, and utterly paralyzed. Behind the wave of terror is a man named Giuseppe Morello. Born in Corleone, Sicily in 1867, Morello immigrated to New York in 1892, already a wanted man. His right hand is gnarled, twisted from birth into a permanent claw, a deformity that earns him a nickname whispered in fear: the clutch hand. Morello understands something fundamental about the immigrant experience. Desperation breeds obedience. Fear is more profitable than labor. He builds his empire not on loyalty, but on inevitability.
Resistance is futile, because resistance is fatal. By 1905, Morello controls a network that stretches from East Harlem to Brooklyn. His operation is meticulous. Counterfeit currency, expertly forged, floods the immigrant economy. Small businesses unknowingly accept fake bills, then find themselves in debt to Morello's collectors. It's a trap designed with the precision of a Swiss watch. The bills fund the muscle. The muscle enforces the extortion. The extortion generates cash. The cash buys protection from the police. And the wheel keeps turning. Morello's crew operates from the back rooms of cafes and social clubs, places where old men play cards and speak in riddles. His lieutenants include men like Ignazio Lupo, known as Lupo the Wolf, a kidnapper and killer so vicious that his name alone empties rooms. Another lieutenant, a young Sicilian named Salvatore d'Aquila, watches Morello closely, learning not just the business, but the psychology of control. D'Aquila sees that violence is cheap. What matters is making people believe violence is inevitable. The newspapers began calling it the Black Hand, treating it like a single organization. But it's not. It's a tactic, a branding exercise, a psychological weapon. Dozens of small crews use the symbol, each operating independently, extorting their own neighborhoods. But Morello is different. He's not just extorting, he's building infrastructure. He taxes other Black Hand operators, forcing them to pay him tribute. He's creating a hierarchy, an invisible government layered beneath the city's official one. The violence is strategic. Morello doesn't kill indiscriminately. He kills publicly. Bodies are left in places where everyone will see them. Barrels wash ashore near the Brooklyn docks, their contents rotted, bloated, unidentifiable except for one detail. The hands are always bound. The message is unmistakable. This is what happens to those who speak. In 1905, the New York Police Department creates the Italian Squad, a specialized unit tasked with infiltrating and dismantling the Black Hand networks. Leading it is a man named Giuseppe Petrosino, born in Padula, Italy, who immigrated to New York as a child. Petrosino is short, stocky, with a thick mustache and eyes that never blink. He speaks the dialects of Sicily, Calabria, and Campania. He knows the culture, the rituals, the codes. More importantly, he understands the psychology. Petrosino is relentless. He dresses as a laborer, blending into the docks and construction sites. He attends funerals, watches who speaks to whom, maps the invisible networks. He raids counterfeit operations, seizes weapons, arrests enforcers. His successes are legendary. In 1 year alone, he makes over 500 arrests. Newspapers celebrate him as the Italian Sherlock Holmes. But Petrosino knows the truth. For every man he jails, 2 more appear. The roots are deep, deeper than the law can reach. The real power, he realizes, isn't in New York, it's in Sicily. The criminals aren't just immigrants. They're soldiers in a war that began centuries ago. A war imported from the hills of Palermo and the villages of Corleone. If he can trace their origins, if he can expose the networks connecting New York to Sicily, he believes he can destroy them. In February 1909, Petrosino sails to Palermo under an assumed name. He tells no one except his superiors. His mission is simple: gather criminal records, birth certificates, and evidence linking New York's gangsters to Sicily's Mafia families. But someone talks. Whether it's a corrupt official, a leak in the department, or a Mafia informant within the NYPD, the word spreads. Petrosino is coming. On the evening of March 12, 1909, Petrosino sits alone in Palermo's Piazza Marina, near a statue of Garibaldi. The square is quiet, lit by gas lamps. 2 men approach. One speaks in dialect, asking for a light. Petrosino reaches into his coat. The men draw revolvers. 4 shots echo through the square. Petrosino collapses, blood pooling beneath the lampposts. His passport, still in his pocket, identifies him. The killers disappear into the narrow streets. His body is found hours later. The news reaches New York by telegraph. Headlines scream, "American detective murdered in Sicily." Over 200,000 people line the streets for his funeral, one of the largest in the city's history. But within weeks, the killings resume. The Black Hand letters return. Morello's empire, untouched, continues to grow. Petrosino's death sends a message louder than any newspaper could print. The Mafia is not bound by borders. It is an organism that spans oceans, adapts to environments, and survives by devouring anyone who threatens it. By 1910, Giuseppe Morello's network is no longer a gang. It's a system. He controls counterfeiting, extortion, kidnapping, and gambling across all 5 boroughs. His reach extends into labor unions, where he manipulates strikes and negotiates wages for a fee. He infiltrates construction, ensuring contracts go to companies that pay tribute. He even begins experimenting with narcotics, importing opium through the docks, distributing it through pharmacies and private clubs. But Morello's success creates enemies. In Brooklyn, Salvatore D'Aquila begins to assert his independence. He's younger, hungrier, and believes Morello's old-world methods are inefficient. D'Aquila starts recruiting his own soldiers, Sicilians loyal to him, not to Morello. He declares himself the rightful capo di tutti capi, the boss of bosses, a title that enrages Morello. The tension simmers for years. Occasional shootings, bodies found in alleyways, but nothing definitive. Then, in 1920, everything changes. The United States Congress passes the 18th Amendment, banning the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol. To reformers, it's a moral victory. To men like Morello and D'Aquila, it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Overnight, millions of Americans become criminals. Speakeasies open in basements, warehouses, and tenement apartments. Breweries go underground. Distilleries operate behind false walls. And the insatiable demand for whiskey, gin, rum, and beer creates a black market so vast it dwarfs every racket that came before. The Mafia doesn't invent bootlegging, they perfect it. They already control the docks, the warehouses, the trucks, and the police. Now they simply switch products. Instead of counterfeit bills, they move crates of Canadian whiskey. Instead of extorting shopkeepers, they supply speakeasies. The profits are staggering. In a single year, bootlegging generates more revenue than a decade of Black Hand operations. Suddenly, the old ways feel obsolete. Extortion letters and barrel murders belong to the past. The future is business. But business requires structure, organization, and most importantly, peace. The old bosses, men like Morello and D'Aquila, cling to Sicilian traditions. Blood feuds, vendettas, territorial pride. They see the world through the lens of villages separated by mountains. But a new generation is rising. Men like Charles Luciano, Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, and Meyer Lansky. They're younger, born in America or raised here. They speak English fluently. They understand capitalism. They see the Mafia not as a Sicilian secret society, but as an American corporation. The year is 1928, and the city's underworld is a chessboard. Every neighborhood is controlled by a different crew. Every racket has a different boss. Bootlegging has made everyone rich, but it's also made everyone paranoid. Trust is scarce. Alliances shift weekly. Violence, once strategic, has become chaotic. Giuseppe Morello, known as Joe the Boss, has emerged as the most powerful figure in New York. Stocky, crude, and utterly ruthless, Morello controls Manhattan's bootlegging operations, extortion rackets, and much of the waterfront. He answers to no one. He fears no one. His word is law. But in Brooklyn, a rival is organizing. Salvatore Maranzano, a Sicilian immigrant who arrived in 1925, is everything Morello is not. Educated, disciplined, obsessed with Roman military history. Maranzano believes the Mafia should operate like Caesar's legions, hierarchical, organized, efficient. He begins recruiting Sicilian immigrants loyal to him, forming what becomes known as the Castellammarese clan, named after the town in Sicily where most of his soldiers originate. Morello views Maranzano as a threat. Maranzano views Morello as a dinosaur. The stage is set. The war begins quietly. A Mafia lieutenant is shot outside a cafe in the Bronx. A Maranzano soldier is found in the Hudson River, hands bound, pockets filled with stones. The newspapers call it gang violence. The police call it inevitable. But to those inside, it's a war of extinction. One side will survive, the other will be erased. Between 1930 and 1931, over 60 men are killed. The violence spreads from Brooklyn to Manhattan, from the Bronx to New Jersey. Bombings, drive-by shootings, ambushes in restaurants. The city is a battlefield, and ordinary citizens are collateral damage. Watching from the sidelines is Charles Luciano, one of Mafia's top lieutenants. Born Salvatore Lucania in Sicily in 1897, Luciano arrived in New York as a child. He grew up on the Lower East Side, learning to hustle, steal, and survive. By his 20s, he's running bootlegging operations, gambling dens, and prostitution rings. He's smart, ruthless, and crucially, he's strategic. Luciano sees what others don't. The Castellammarese War is pointless. It's killing soldiers, draining profits, and drawing law enforcement attention. Worse, it's inefficient. The old bosses are fighting over territory like medieval warlords, blind to the bigger picture. Luciano begins secret meetings with key players on both sides. He talks to Frank Costello, his closest ally, a smooth operator who understands politics better than most politicians. He talks to Vito Genovese, a killer who understands loyalty. He talks to Meyer Lansky, a Jewish gangster who understands money. And he talks to younger members of Maranzano's crew, men who are tired of fighting, tired of losing friends, tired of uncertainty. Luciano proposes something radical: end the war, not through negotiation, through elimination. April 15, 1931, Coney Island, a restaurant called Nuova Villa Tamaro. It's a quiet afternoon. Joe Mafia sits at a corner table, eating pasta and playing cards with Luciano. They've been there for hours, drinking wine, laughing. Mafia trusts Luciano completely. At precisely 3:30 p.m., Luciano excuses himself to use the restroom. Minutes later, 4 men enter the restaurant. They're armed with pistols. No one speaks. The shots are loud, final. Mafia collapses across the table, blood pooling beneath the playing cards. The killers leave as quickly as they arrived. Luciano returns from the restroom, his face perfectly composed. He tells police he saw nothing. He was in the bathroom. With Mafia dead, Salvatore Maranzano calls a meeting. Over 400 mafiosi gather in a hall in the Bronx. Maranzano stands before them, victorious. He declares himself capo di tutti capi, boss of bosses. He announces a new structure. 5 families will control New York. Each will have a boss, an underboss, captains, soldiers. Disputes will be settled to a council. There will be rules, order, discipline. Luciano listens. He smiles. He nods. But inside, he's calculating. Maranzano is dangerous. Brilliant, yes. Organized, yes. But also autocratic, paranoid, and obsessed with Sicilian purity. Maranzano views non-Sicilians, Jews like Meyer Lansky, as beneath him. He believes in the old codes, the old hierarchies. Luciano sees a different future. Within months, Maranzano begins plotting to eliminate potential threats. Luciano, Genovese, Costello, all of them. He's paranoid, convinced they're planning against him. He's not wrong. September 10, 1931. Maranzano's office, Park Avenue, Manhattan. 4 men arrive, dressed as federal agents. They show badges. Maranzano, believing it's a raid, complies. They pull out knives and pistols. Maranzano is stabbed and shot. His body is left on the floor of his own office. The killers leave calmly, badges still visible. Within hours, Luciano calls another meeting. This time, there's no speech about being boss of bosses. There's no proclamation of supremacy. Instead, Luciano introduces a new concept: the Commission. 7 men will sit on it, representing the 5 New York families plus Chicago and Buffalo. Decisions will be made collectively. Disputes will be arbitrated. Violence will be sanctioned, not spontaneous. The goal is simple: maximize profit, minimize chaos. The era of the warlords is over. The era of the corporation has begun. The commission convenes for the first time in late 1931. The structure is simple but revolutionary. Each of the 5 New York families is autonomous, controlling specific territories and operations. But major decisions, expansions into new cities, conflicts between families, are decided by vote. No single boss is above the law of the commission. Even murder requires approval. Frank Costello becomes Luciano's most trusted advisor. Costello understands something the others don't. Real power isn't in the streets, it's in City Hall, in courtrooms, in police precincts. He begins cultivating relationships with politicians, judges, union leaders. He donates to campaigns. He arranges favors. He ensures that when police raid a gambling den, they're tipped off hours in advance. He ensures that when prosecutors build cases, key witnesses disappear. Costello doesn't carry a gun. He doesn't need to. His weapon is influence. Vito Genovese, on the other hand, is the enforcer. Cold, calculating, utterly without conscience. Genovese ensures that commission decisions are executed. Traitors are found. Debts are collected. Loyalty is maintained. Carlo Gambino, younger but ambitious, begins building his own power base. He's patient, methodical, content to wait for his moment. The commission proves its worth almost immediately. In 1932, a dispute arises over control of Brooklyn's waterfront. Previously, such conflicts would trigger open war. Now, representatives meet. Evidence is presented. Testimony is heard. A decision is rendered. Territory is divided. Everyone profits. Violence is avoided. It's efficient. It's profitable. It's genius. The families begin expanding operations. Bootlegging remains lucrative, but they diversify. Gambling operations spread from Harlem to Midtown. Loan sharking targets small businesses desperate for capital. Labor unions are infiltrated, their pension funds skimmed, their strikes controlled. Construction projects require approval. Cement suppliers pay tribute. Even the entertainment industry, nightclubs, theaters, boxing matches, falls under their influence. By the mid-1930s, the 5 families control an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And the public has no idea. To most New Yorkers, the Mafia is a myth, an exaggerated story from the old days. They see the results, the nightclubs, the jobs, the order, but not the machinery beneath. Then comes December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. America enters World War II. Within months, the entire economy shifts. Factories retool for war production. Shipyards operate around the clock. Millions of men enlist, leaving labor shortages everywhere. And the docks, the lifeline of the war effort, become critical. Ships arrive daily, carrying munitions, vehicles, food. Sabotage is a genuine fear. German U-boats lurk off the coast. Reports of Axis spies infiltrating dock workers circulate. The Navy is desperate for intelligence, for control, for security. They turn to an unlikely source. Lucky Luciano is sitting in a New York prison, convicted in 1936 on prostitution charges. But his influence hasn't diminished. From his cell, he still controls the Genovese family. He still receives visitors. He still makes decisions. In 1942, naval intelligence reaches out. They need help securing the docks. They need informants, enforcers, eyes and ears. Luciano listens. Then he negotiates. In exchange for his cooperation, he wants consideration for parole. The deal is struck. Operation Underworld is born. Luciano's men infiltrate the docks. They monitor shipments, report suspicious activity, prevent strikes. When rumors of sabotage surface, Luciano's enforcers investigate, quietly eliminating threats. The Navy never asks how. They only care that it works. And it does. The docks run smoothly. Shipments arrive on time. Sabotage is nearly non-existent. For the first time in American history, the government and the Mafia are allies. The partnership extends beyond the docks. In 1943, as the Allies plan the invasion of Sicily, naval intelligence again turns to Luciano. They need contacts, maps, intelligence on German positions. Luciano provides names, Sicilian Mafia members who hate Mussolini's fascists. The invasion succeeds, in part due to intelligence gathered through Mafia channels. By 1945, the war is over. Luciano's sentence is commuted. In exchange for his cooperation, he's deported to Italy. He leaves America in 1946, never to return. But his legacy remains. The commission endures. The five families are stronger than ever. And the Mafia, once seen as a criminal gang, has proven it can operate on a global scale. The 1950s are the golden age. The families are flush with cash. Bootlegging is gone, replaced by gambling, narcotics, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. Frank Costello, now the most powerful boss in New York, operates from the shadows. He's known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, a man who can make a phone call and change a mayoral election. He owns judges, police captains, and politicians. His influence is so vast that federal investigators struggle to find anyone willing to testify. Carlo Gambino is rising. Patient, disciplined, he's building alliances, positioning himself for the future. Vito Genovese, deported during the war but now back, is scheming, planning to reclaim power. The families are profitable, organized, and seemingly invincible. Casinos in Havana, controlled by Meyer Lansky, generate millions. Heroin, smuggled from Marseille and distributed through Harlem, becomes a new revenue stream. Construction in New York is entirely controlled. Every building, every road, every bridge involves Mafia-connected cement companies, trucking firms, and labor unions. The city grows, and the families grow with it. But cracks are forming. Ambition breeds resentment. Genovese wants Costello's power. Gambino wants Genovese's position. Old alliances fray. The commission still meets, still arbitrates, but the discipline is weakening. Then, November 14, 1957, a private estate in Appalachian, New York. Over 100 mobsters from across the country gather for a meeting. The purpose is to discuss narcotics policy, resolve disputes, and reinforce the commission's authority. It's meant to be secret. But a local police officer notices expensive cars arriving at a rural estate. He's suspicious. He calls for backup. State troopers surround the property. Panic erupts. Men flee through the woods, over fences, abandoning their cars. Some are caught, others escape. But the damage is done. Newspapers splash the story across front pages. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who for years denied the existence of a national crime syndicate, can no longer ignore it. Federal investigations intensify. The families adapt. Security tightens. Meetings become smaller, more cautious. The commission continues, but its vulnerability is exposed. The era of invisibility is ending. The 1960s bring new challenges. The Valachi hearings in 1963 expose the Mafia's inner workings. Joseph Valachi, a soldier in the Genovese family, becomes the first made man to publicly testify. He describes the structure, the rituals, the commission. Suddenly, the public understands what law enforcement has known for decades. The Mafia is real, it's organized, and it's everywhere. Federal agencies, emboldened, create specialized task forces. Wiretaps become common. Surveillance is constant. The families respond by compartmentalizing. Bosses insulate themselves, using layers of intermediaries. Communication becomes coded. Meetings happen in moving cars, in public parks. Anywhere surveillance is difficult. But the pressure is relentless. Then, in 1970, Congress passes the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. It's a legal weapon designed specifically to dismantle organized crime. Prosecutors can now charge entire organizations, not just individuals. Suddenly, the commission itself is a target. The 1980s are devastating. RICO prosecutions dismantle crew after crew. Bosses are indicted for decades of accumulated crimes. The commission case in 1985 charges the heads of all 5 families. For the first time, the leadership is on trial simultaneously. Convictions follow. Sentences are long, often life. The structure that Luciano built begins to collapse. The families survive, but they're shadows of their former selves. Younger generations lack the discipline. Loyalty erodes. Informants multiply. The code of silence, once absolute, is shattered. By the 1990s, the Mafia's dominance is over. They still exist, still operate, but they're no longer the invisible government they once were. New criminal organizations, Russian, Albanian, Chinese, fill the vacuum. The city changes. Technology changes. The world moves on. Today, New York City is unrecognizable from the tenements of 1905. The skyscrapers rise higher. The streets are cleaner. Little Italy is a tourist attraction, a handful of blocks selling cannoli and nostalgia. The docks are automated. The unions are reformed. The construction industry, once entirely controlled, is heavily regulated. But the legacy remains. Buildings financed by Mafia money still stand. Roads paved with cement from mob-owned companies still carry traffic. Labor unions, reformed but scarred, still bear the marks of infiltration. Political corruption, though not as blatant, still echoes the tactics perfected by Frank Costello. And in the collective memory, the Mafia remains a symbol of ambition, of ruthlessness, of the American dream twisted into something dark and enduring. The story of how the Mafia took over New York is not a story of violence alone. It's a story of organization, discipline, and strategy. It's a story of men who understood that power is not seized through chaos, but through structure, that fear is only effective when combined with profit, that loyalty, when properly incentivized, is stronger than any law. Giuseppe Morello, standing in a coffee shop in 1905, couldn't have imagined what his network would become. Joe Petrosino, dying in a Sicilian square, couldn't have known his sacrifice would be remembered long after the criminals he chased faded into history. Lucky Luciano, sitting in an Italian cafe in 1962, a year before his death, must have reflected on the empire he built and the empire that outlasted him. The Mafia didn't storm City Hall. They didn't need to. They built a parallel government, invisible but omnipresent. They took over New York not through conquest, but through patience. And for decades, they ruled from the shadows, proving that the most dangerous power is the power no one sees. Until, slowly, inevitably, the light began to shine. And in that light, the empire crumbled. But the lessons, the methods, the psychology, those endure. The story of the Mafia is a warning and a fascination, a reminder that control can be invisible, that organization can overcome chaos, and that in America, the line between legitimate business and organized crime has always been thinner than anyone wants to admit. The city has moved on, but the shadows remember. And in those shadows, the ghosts of Luciano, Costello, Gambino, and all the others still whisper their secrets. Secrets of how an empire was built, how it ruled, and how, eventually, even the most powerful empires must fall.